doing a fake homebrew called Overworld. It's kind of post World War One with what if a Tesla had set off a gravity bomb, and it's also laundry day.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be getting into character development and character creation. Ideally, with character creation, I'll be working with Charlie and Mariah. We'll be going through the world we threw together. I guess where do we begin? I guess at the beginning.
So we were playing the Legacy guide, you said?
Yeah. So just going to fill everybody in on what's going. So alternate timeline, World War One is getting way out of hand. Tesla isn't just a genius with electricity, he's also a genius with gravity, and he decides the best way to stop the world from consuming itself in war is basically to detonate this device in order just to effectively stop everything in its tracks. The premise behind it was that by creating sort of like a Dr. Manhattan level event, if he creates such a catastrophic event, it'll force everybody to galvanize and pull together across the planet. So instead of using a giant starfish that eats everybody, he decided to fight fire with fire and basically stop the war by launching this device. And his belief was, oh my God, they will see how terrible this war is. And it's not like our World War One, it was World War One times more. It was like the extreme version of that. So his intentions were good. Unfortunately, his genius kind of got the better of him. He was kind of working with gravity and electricity. He ended up creating basically a reality bomb instead of just a gravity bomb. He was good. He just rolled a few natural 20s on the damage intake, and well, things happen. So what happened with that was this kind of leads into the periods. I'm just going to go through the periods really, really quick. The normal gravity period, basically that's kind of what we'd envision World War One to be like. You don't have any robotic automatons now or anything like this. It's basically exploring magic. It belongs to secret societies. There's a couple of mechanical inventions, zeppelins, aerocraft, that kind of thing. There is basically a secret society called the Vulgate, and very little is known about them. But from what was gleaned from that period was that the First World War was not a mistake. They specifically engineered that for their purposes. So they were discovered right before the bomb went off, and one of Tesla's alternate reasons for detonating this thing was also to stop the Vulgate. Whatever they were that he discovered, he was so afraid of them that he was willing to take that risk. Then that leads us to the upheaval period. This is effectively the aftermath of when it detonates. So we had continents like, we had large sections of North America, Australia, Africa, Europe, literally splitting apart and levitating up, and then splitting apart again. So basically, the bottom part of the Earth that we know and love is just this chaotic maelstrom of stores and oceans just pouring over things and constant earthquakes. It was just this nightmare to live on. So basically people fled to the sky. And the big thing with that was you had all these islands which were part of former continents floating up, but nobody couldn't actually really interact because they were spaced out, and the means of air travel were fairly limited, to put it mildly. So they were kind of screwed. So everybody was kind of, during the upheaval, trying to relearn how to survive and thrive in these islands where you may not have a lake. So you better collect all the rainwater when it comes down, because that's what you've got until the next rainfall. So different islands have different resources and that kind of thing. During this time, people started not just turning to science, but also getting more invested in magic. But magic is really kind of limited in terms of power. Those practices that we have, whether tarot cards or secret societies, they were kind of limited, but they were becoming more widely accepted. And this is when evolution starts taking its little thing. You start seeing like strange hybrid animals appearing on some of the islands. You see regular flora and fauna, but sometimes they're just bigger. So doing the Lord of the Rings, riding on the back of an eagle, now becomes feasible because we now have eagles that size. And for whatever science magic reason, they fly. I don't know, science magic, it's just a thing. So the big thing in the upheaval is uh, there's two big things. Basically, everybody's up in the sky now. We're seeing evolution. People are starting to be able to go from island to island with the event, with learning how to ride these animals. And that secret society, the Vulgate, people found them. They were located on the far kind of core quadrant of the overworld, and they're known because they are they're known as the a Vulgate Fane is basically a huge invasion force. Before, where it was a small secret society, they basically recruited. You often see them, should you be unfortunate enough to see them. They're humanoid. You can't really get a good look of what species they are per se, because they're wearing these thick black lacquered masks. They're more like faceplates, but there's little sigils grooved on the top of them that go around the whole length of the head. People have noticed that for whatever reason, when they're in proximity to others of their kind, they start to glow. Usually, the colors they wear are red, black, and gold. Always have lacquered armor. They're known for being masters of wielding three blades simultaneously. They've got two hands, but they've got sort of like a trikatana thing going on. They've got a long sword, a short sword, and basically like a combination throwing star boomerang, except instead of being like the little shuriken, it's roughly the size of somebody's head. So,
No, boomerang.
yeah, effectively. The only difference between that and the boomerang is these things can split into two.
Ah.
So you throw, it splits into two, and you can either be fighting both-handed, or they can come back into one thing.
I also assumed it looked more like a shuriken than a boomerang.
It depends on who you see, because in this period, the Vulgate were wide and varied, and there was a lot of them. And the scary thing is, nobody knew exactly where they came from. They just appeared. And the thing is, not only did they appear, but they seemed well coordinated from attacks. They seemed professionally trained, but they also seemed fairly limited. They didn't. We'll get into the next thing. The big thing about the Vulgate is that they relied specifically on winged animals in order to get from island to island, and that becomes a big thing in the next era, because with the next era, it's the post-Tesla gravity era, and that's when they find these beautiful, gorgeous crystals everywhere. They're embedded underneath a lot of these continents. They're coming up on some of these airships, and they actually repel gravity. So one of the things with this is you can now create airships, which vary in size from skiffs, sort of like the one you'd see in Return of the Jedi going alongside the big barge, and they can go from island to island, and you can create much bigger ships, and these ships resemble the sailing vessels that we used to have with the big masts and this kind of thing, except underneath it's all crystals. So it kind of operates a lot like a Harrier jet. The crystals kind of push it up, and then you get a wind mage or a mechanical device to actually propel it forward. And this opened up everything. You had everything from societies doing trade to negotiating treaties. It was sort of like a dwarven tavern brawl. You started having 6 islands and 18 different alliances between them. And we found the development of 2 main political forces in the inner core. One is the Alliance, which is kind of more old school Earth, aristocracies, the capitalism, that kind of hard work ethic, whereas the Coalition was a combination of the...
called aristocracy hard work ethic.
It's the propaganda that goes. And the other one was effectively the Coalition, which was made up of many more islands, but usually smaller with a few resources that had to really rely on one another just to get by. So we go through that period, and the Vulgate forces are actually amassing at this point and starting to spread it even further. So this is one of the few times the Coalition and the Alliance actually worked together. So they assembled a massive force. It was literally anybody and everybody who was capable got together, went to the far side of the overworld, and basically they annihilated 5,000 islands because they realized that the Vulgate, for whatever reason, hadn't figured out or weren't able to use the anti-gravity crystals, and these beasts like the bats or the avians could only go so far on their own power before they had to touch down. So they created a giant fire break, and also denied the Vulgate the access to the crystals that would have been on these islands had they gotten them. So that happened, and it also displaced a large group of people called the Well, but we'll talk about them later. So it was a victory for both forces. They weren't able to kill the Vulgate, but they were able to stop them by creating this big barrier zone that they called the Null Zone by annihilating all these islands. So effectively, it didn't matter how fearsome those creatures were. They just could not make the trip. They were kind of limited by their lack of technology, and that was great because then you get a couple centuries of peace with the woke. With the woke, what happens now? Because the woke, it's the period, and they call it the woke because magic starts permeating more. It is, and it's not just in a small area of the overworld, which is these islands. It's everywhere. All of a sudden, you've got people with these backgrounds in magic actually able to do high-level magic. Other people who have never known anything but toil and trouble are all of a sudden able to use the elements. It's not everyone, but it's definitely coming there. You have the rise of the worldlings, which are these scientists are still trying to figure out if they're animals that became humanoid or humans started to adapt animalistic features. And effectively, that's where they come from. We get into a little bit more history, and then we start getting into the Draconian Wars there. I'll let you guys go through that. The main thing was that there was four dragons, and effectively, with the big Draconian War, people were going down to the planet surface to harvest crystals and go treasure hunting for those islands that collapsed. Most of them were coming back as horrific mutants, incredibly scarred psychologically, and basically returning as abominations.
Didn't the dragons go down before the islands did?
No,
Okay, oops.
So what happened was, you've got the Alliance saying we're going to put an end to this. That you're coming back as abominations and reavers. This is not a good thing. And the Coalition has said we finally have a chance to pay off all of our student loans and join the big kids club with money and power and fame and respect and everything that the Lotto Max promises us. Who are you to stop us from buying a Lotterio ticket? And the Alliance is you're buying lottery tickets, not winning, and coming back as the Bride of Frankenstein meets Predator from Aliens. No, this is not okay.
Racist.
Yeah, yes, speciesist. Yeah, right. So one of the dragons, there were three major dragons at this point, and they basically said they would abstain from interfering with what goes on these islands and human affairs, except one of them, Haven. No, sorry, it was Tusk, I believe. Said no. This has to be stopped. This represents a threat. So when basically you had an alliance army, coalition army about to fight over this. One side was joined by a dragon, and then Tanith, the other dragon, basically came on the side of the coalition and says, no, we said we'd stay out. I'm pulling you out of the fight. It got bloody and violent. They ended up crashing and trying to kill each other and crash on the planet's surface. And what happened was you had these two armadas who kind of fought with and around and behind and in between them. And that was the big Draconic War at that point. And what actually ended it was, unfortunately, one of the members of the Vulgate actually was able to escape. And he or she was able to trigger a weapon which destroyed, as far as people know, two of the homelands of those dragons. So the third dragon basically returned home, turned off all the lights, locked all the doors, put up the wards, and got a shotgun, and basically, no, you stay the hell away from here. I don't care who you are. You don't need my wisdom that much.
Get off my land.
You can't have it, it's mine.
You can't have it, man. Well, sir, we'd just like to talk to you about our Lord. I said, get out. So this was a big thing. So basically, with that war, you had the disappearance of the one dragon who retreated. And that was Havender. Tanith and Tusk fought each other, landed on the surface of the planet, never to be seen from again. And then you had a fourth dragon appear, and when dragons appear, they just kind of materialize with a collection of islands under them. And this is Elastith, dear, and nobody knows what Elastith wants. Like basically, this is kind of a big unknown. So what happened was after this period, things have settled down a lot. The Alliance and the Coalition are still kind of recovering centuries later after these battles because the losses were that intense. The Gear kind who evolved during the upheaval, not evolved but were created, are these sentient gearwalk mechanical constructs. And their big thing is they're consistently trying to form their own homeland, their own island just for them. So the worldlings, these animalistic creatures, or creature-like animalistics, they appear everywhere. There's no one area. They just kind of started. They basically started evolving there or being birthed there, depending on the species. So basically, this is where we find ourselves right now. Basically, you got the Alliance over here, the Coalition over here. They're still licking their wounds and trying to get their economies running and starting to make new alliances. Right now, the Dragon States, there was 3 of them. 2 of them got nuked, but nobody's really sure if they blew up or if it was a disease or what. They're just basically gone dormant. On top of that, you've got the 4th dragon who's just appeared off on the periphery that everybody's working really hard to kind of, it's like, okay, you get that, when you go to a Christmas or a family reunion and you've got that one cousin everybody likes and they bring their partner who nobody knows, but is obviously like, wow, so who are you again? We haven't heard of you. You're not from, okay, that's a hacky sack and this is hemp. Right, okay, we can figure this out. They're not sure what to make of this person, so everyone's kind of treating them with kid gloves, right?
That's nice.
Yeah, it's nice. It's sort of like when you're visiting your partner's family for the holidays and everybody's behaving themselves, which is not what your partner told you they would be doing. It's kind of like that. Yeah, right. So the big thing is there are rumors coming out of the No Zone, and this has been dismissed by the Coalition, dismissed by the Alliance.
Sorry, there's rumors of what coming out of the No Zone?
Getting to that point, that a huge ship, a Vulgate ship, has been sighted. And it's, the tabloids have dubbed it as the Night Mistress. But the weird thing is, when you go to find the sources of people, when people go to find the sources of who've claimed to have seen it, well, people who kind of border on the Null Zone are mercenaries, or smugglers, or wanted fugitives and criminals, or people running to something or from something. Not exactly reliable. And the funny thing is, they don't have an photographer with them or a sketchbook, so it's usually kind of just rumors whispered around bars and pubs and local dives, that kind of thing.
So it's Bigfoot.
It's Bigfoot and Sasquatch.
I mean...
And you're actually getting to the point where people are like, okay, well, we haven't seen this 4th dragon. Are we sure it's really a dragon? And you get those old timers saying, well, I remember the dragon back in the day. It was a colossal battle. And meanwhile, you have like, yes, I understand, old timer, that you do, but according to my texts, these 2 dragons, as you call them, were vast airships that resembled dragons, but were in fact highly divine and skilled airships whose obvious use of technology would have baffled a small inferior mind such as yourself. Who are you calling inferior? You good-for-nothing layabout. I practice meditation for 12 hours a day to home. You take a nap! It's a nap! And you and your feet, what are those things in there? Those things don't say nothing. Those are letters. They don't say nothing to me. So you're getting this kind of dismissal of the past kind of thing going on. But for the most part, everybody is kind of fighting and trying to stay alive and pay their bills and just have a good life and keep on the run from whatever's chasing them.
All right.
High concepts and archetypes.
All right.
So, won't go through all of them, but basically we've got your stereotypical bounty hunter. We don't need to go through that. You get pirates and privateers. Your bounty hunter will basically go from island to island, basically finding people and bringing them back for bounty or cash. Bounty hunter is also a very polite way of saying paid assassin. But since paid assassins are frowned upon and very illegal, they're bounty hunters. It's okay.
Which, is also illegal in some places. But,
But they also have their own guilds. There's a coalition guild, an alliance guild, and then there's an outlier guild. So you've got your pick of 3 of those. Pirates and privateers, basically the same thing, except the privateers have permission to wage theft on
Yeah.
yeah. So
on certain beaches.
Pirates are criminals, and privateers are pirates
Hired
that
army.
work for a government.
so and the best thing to do is the privateers. Some of them will get contracts from the alliance to raid the coalition. Some will get contracts from the coalition to raid the alliance, and some will get both, depending on the time of year and who's having what festival season when. It's a lot of bookkeeping, but it's a thing. Outlier contracts. Those are contracts around kind of like the null zone and outside of the big core where those 2 factions are. That kind of pirating is when you start getting into slaving and other things.
Yeah.
So that's not a... And those contracts are usually a lot more bloodthirsty. If you want to get a contract that takes you down to the surface of the planet, that's where you would go. Envoys, ambassadors, and emissaries, you have several thousand islands of different ranks of these. You cannot throw a dead kite bat without hitting at least 6 different envoys. The important ones to remember are Alliance, Coalition, and anybody who works for the Outliers Guild. Those are ranged from well-born noble families to, well, you see, my boss runs several of the islands through various interesting enterprises. They're not good, they're not bad, they're just kind of effective. And you know what? You need a lot of water. And you know what comes through our territories? Water caravans. I'm just saying, it would be a shame if you didn't sign this contract and something happened to those caravan routes. I mean, accidents, they happen. You'd be so thirsty. But but please, I know I'm not from one of your fancy families, but humor me.
So gangs.
No. They're organized financial
Mafia.
family syndicates. It's so respectable. You know what you got? Silva. You know what we need? Silva. You also have kneecaps, but tell you what, I'll get you a deal. Pick one. You don't get both.
So, mafia.
So yeah, you've got the mafia. You've got acolytes of deer. Deer is the suffix for anything relating to a dragon. Acolytes are basically the ones who kind of got fed up with everything. They got fed up with being poor, or they got fed up with being born to a highbrow family who's just out of touch with reality. They were the ones who, or they were persecuted for whatever reason, so they basically went to the dragon states and petitioned to become citizens. And not everybody who went there was accepted, but some were. So those dragon states do have their own culture, usually made up of effectively people who have left the coalition and the alliance to find something better for themselves. You've got, your look of confusion.
No, I'm just... Isn't there only basically one accessible dragon state right now?
Right now, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Remember in the 90s was like, go to Japan, teach English, pay off your bills, learn another culture. It's like, wait, you're telling me I have to go to the other side of the planet to do something I'm not qualified to do on the off chance I might actually be more successful there than here? And everybody left in droves? Same type of thing. Soldier, Soldier is a huge, wide range. It goes from gear kind guerrilla fighters to boarding parties to career soldiers. And it really varies depending on who you are and what you are doing. The big thing is that soldiers are formally trained and they got access to far better gear. And that is the big thing. They're not the ones who are going to buckle under pressure or freak out when a boarding party goes wrong. They're tough, they're smart, they're trained, and Overworld, that is saying something. And the last one, personal favorite, Traveling Mystic. Here, the healer, storyteller, courier, researcher, and in a pinch, duelist if you need to be. Sometimes spies in certain areas. Effectively, you go from island to island offering services or insight or learning what you can. Every mystic kind of has their own calling, they call it, and that calling is only known to them. They have their own personal agenda. There's something they're trying to do or learn or fulfill, but every mystic keeps that secret to them, and that is basically not just their motivation, but also kind of the source of their power. It's that one thing that propels them forward and they can draw strength from. And this has led to some mystics having a really great reputation and others having a terrible reputation. And it really depends where you go. I mean, you've got wealthy families who will throw hard coin after mystics to predict the future or help them get one up on arrival. You've got mystics who will be incorporated as part of the annual fall fair.
Wait, so do they have actual magic?
Yeah, they do.
Oh.
They actually have access to that. But depending on the size, the limit, and the type, that really depends on you. So, any questions about the archetypes? Probably not.
No.
Okay.
Okay, I kind of liked the mystic archetype, but I didn't realize magic. Like I thought it was more of a magic wasn't really mentioned in the description, so.
It depends on the mystic. One mystic may be able to do a little bit of ritualistic magic. Another might be actually attuned with an element. Another one may actually use various plants and seeds, grasses, and things to affect medicinal cures. But in this world,
Okay, so it doesn't automatically mean the magic thing is.
it can, but it doesn't have to.
Okay.
So species, we've got 5. Gearkind. Gearkind are mechanical gearwork creatures. They've been around forever, and they were first served as they were the very, very first ones that they can date were automatons, but they became more complex as the years got on and achieved sentience. This was actually amplified by the woke quite a bit. Some of them are incredibly.
I need you to rename that.
Okay. Not right now. I'm not.
Okay.
Some of them have incredibly ornate bodies, like Battle Angel Alita, ivory carved frames, guild work on the outside. Others are more steel, aluminum, more designed for efficiency. Some look very human. Others look very robotic and not human. It really depends who created you and for what purpose. One of the big things is with Gearkind culture, parents, which can involve more than 2, when they create a new one, try and include a couple of minor aspects so it resembles all those who had a hand in creating it. So you can actually have 5 parents, but actually have physical similarities or little nuances or homages to each one of those parents, and you will be treated and trained and guided by them. So it kind of varies that way. They're usually sought to be master mechanics, soldiers. They're known for being strong, versatile, some of them incredibly intelligent. And there are also humans who have lost limbs and replaced them with gear-kind prosthetics. The gear-kind call those gear-kin, and basically view them as those lovable idiot cousins who come by once a year. It's like, oh, you're so... It's like, oh, got a mechanical arm. That is so adorable. Good for you. You can punch through a wall.
Benevolent racism.
It's not racism. It's
Racism.
It's racism.
It's speciesism. We've got worldlings. They evolve across all the islands. They're basically, as I say, scientists are still baffled. Are they humanoid animals or animal humanoids? But they come in all sorts of shapes, sizes, varieties, abilities, and they literally have magic running through their brains. Not their brains, their hands.
Imagine the brains too.
Yeah, but the thing is with their magic, it just affects them. It can change their body. It can enhance their own abilities. Humans, run of the mill. I won't go into length explaining that because not too much has changed. We've got the well. They're crystalline humanoids, and they've got actually a melodic speech pattern. Some of them are actually, a lot of them are very attractive, but some are attractive, some aren't. It's not really important, but what is important is that their ability and affinity with the anti-grav crystals is just amazing. They can heal them by touch. They can sculpt them like clay instead of having to get a crystal mason to actually carve them into what do they need. Their problem was they lived on a lot of the islands that got purged to create the null zone. So they're effectively, they basically had to form communities in other places. So it's not uncommon to see them, but it's not a common occurrence. But they are depending on where you are, they offer different services. It's no, to put a simple idea, complex idea very simply, no two communities are the same. You know, so there's no one area that is this is their homeland. They're kind of everywhere. And the Thorn are basically sentient plants who adopted human form, or humans who started becoming more plant-like. They're like the worldlings, except they're actually plant-based. And the species has this really weird thing. They embrace technology, but it's organic technology. It's stuff they grow as opposed to actually manufacture. So they grow their airships. They breed their weapons as you would various plants. And that's very much how their society and view on things operates. So that's basically the archetypes and the species and the history